Hey guys, I would like to share with you some thoughts on grace. God's been teaching me quite heavily on that in the last few years or so, but very specifically in the last few weeks. And I listened to some grace preachers who are especially hated, like those guys who are hated in most circles, and people talk about them in the worst way. And I don't know how grounded these gossips are. I don't even care. I just started to check out what they actually teach, and I was surprised that I don't know how they behave in most parts of their lives, but what they taught was very refreshing and revelatory. And I was like, I don't know why this guy is so hated. Probably it's grounded. Most likely not. But it just helps me so much. So I'm gonna talk about grace and the way God is teaching me that. Once I was a volunteer, and I was part of the organizer team of a huge conference, and somehow I ended up leading the people who just got saved into another room to have a chat with them, what happened to them, and counseling and all this stuff. So there were around like 50 to 100 people who just said the sinner's prayer, and somehow I ended up alone with all these new believers. And I don't know why, but I felt like asking them the question, was it your first decision in your life? And that was the best I could put it back then. My theology changed quite a bit since that time. But I just asked them, was it your first decision? And you can guess how many hands were in the air. 0. Yeah. And it shocked me. I just realized that these people have been Christians for years, and they are still not certain of their salvation. They still don't know whether their conversion counts, or is it real, or do they really have the ticket to heaven or something. So it wasn't like, oh, let's surrender to Christ all over again. It would sound very spiritual, but that's not what happened there. I have those experiences when I just, I give myself to you, over and over again, and it's fun. But those people, at least most of them, they thought that they had to make their salvation real somehow, because all the previous sinner's prayers somehow weren't the real deal. And it just shocked me that those people have never been told the gospel. They have been told a conditional message of, if you do that, if you respond to God well, then you have salvation. Like, we reduce the gospel into conditional message, a possibility of salvation. Like, the good news is that you might be saved if you do that, instead of the good news is that you are saved. And probably you can refuse your salvation, you can refuse fellowship with God, and probably God's gonna respect that because He's a nice guy and won't force Himself on anyone. But the concept of losing salvation is just nonsense to me at this point. Like, if you couldn't get it, like, how could you lose it? Like, it's not something you buy and sell. It's a gift. Like, you can't buy it, you can't earn it, you can't get it. Like, you have been given it, period. And everyone in this whole wide world has been given the salvation. And if you think it's a heresy, just read the Bible. It says that everyone has been saved through Christ. And I don't know how it's gonna play out. Probably plenty of people or some people will reject it. But it's not about what you do to make your part of the salvation deal fixed. And all the how you should react and what you should do with that part of salvation is just the denial of the gospel. The gospel doesn't have a small letter part on the bottom. Like, it's free, and the little star in the corner, and under it you can read, but you need to make your deeds and behavior appropriate for it after that. It's free, and there is nothing to be added to that. And people are so afraid, especially here in Hungary, that if you tell people that grace is not conditional and the blessings of God are not conditional, they think that people will end up sinning all the more and will behave terrible, and it will just liberate them to live terribly. And we believe that because every time we preach grace, the short run results of it is that people won't behave as good as they used to. And the reason for that is that when people hear the message of unconditional acceptance, they just they become free from all the condemnation, and they stop all the good deeds which they had done before because of this sense of responsibility and condemnation and performance. And we think it's the bad fruit of the Hypergrace teaching, but it's actually just a revelation, just the representation of how much we were under pressure and how much we were doing the good things only because there was a pressure on us. And pretending and faking and trying to be is not something that counts in heaven or in the spiritual realm. So acting as if you were holy, as if you don't want to do that bad stuff, is not something that is valuable. You are holy because of Jesus. Of course you are holy, but trying to pretend that you are something that you don't believe you are is not something that will produce fruit. Fruit, for example, the fruit of holiness is a fruit, and it's not something that you press out of yourself and force yourself to do. If you let God love on you no matter what, and you become drenched in this unconditional love, knowing that you can't fall out of that grace, you can't make God become upset about you. You don't need to be afraid of putting on that last straw that finally breaks the camel's back. You don't need to put on any responsibility on yourself regarding your salvation. Then maybe you will be a bit cheeky first, because you will try like, oh, God still loves me when I do that? Is he still blessing me when I don't do that? It's just, you just play with it maybe first, and after a while you become so drenched in it, like, oh wow, he still loves me, he still accepts me, I'm still okay with him. Like, I can't mess up my relationship with him. He's still there. He's still not refusing me. It just shocks you after a while. And for some it's a few days, for some it's a few years. But it doesn't matter. What comes afterwards is the real fruit. Oh my gosh, if he is that good, if this God is that much fun, I will never want to do or think or go anywhere that is far from that fun God. I want to experience the closest things to him. I don't want to do or think anything that is not compatible with him, because I'm attracted to that infinite goodness and love and acceptance. And then you behave holy because there's nothing else you want to do. You become drenched in this acceptance, and you find out like, oh, how free I am to be holy, to act holy. I read a testimony on a page of one of the grace preachers, and it was a testimony of a man who was deep into sexual sins, like pornography and that kind of stuff, and he couldn't get out of it. And then he started to listen to grace teachings, and then he got completely free, and he's having an awesome life at this point. But there was an amazing sentence in that testimony, and I can't really quote that, but I would try. Somehow, knowing that God accepts and loves me unconditionally, somehow kept me from sinning. And I was like, yeah, somehow. You just receive and receive this love, and before you realize it, you become it. Before you know it, you just realize like, oh, if I'm not that sinful guy, then maybe I can act like someone who is not sinful. Like, you just, it just changes you from the inside. You just happen to bear the fruit of holiness. I remember there was a time in my life when I was in sin, and I also spent a lot of time with God, and I spent hours just worshiping and soaking, but I was still in sin. And when I was worshiping, I already knew that I would be back in that sin like in an hour. And this was the so-called abuse of grace, or if you want to put it that way. Like, yeah, that's what I was doing, abusing grace. And it was the best time of my life. I'm telling you. I was in sin and with God at the same time. And I felt so free. Like, God just still loves me. He still comes close to me. He enjoys me. Even if I messed up, like, I cannot be worse than the way I am, and He still loves me. Then I can never lose that love. Like, if I can enjoy His presence in that state, like, I will never miss His presence. And it was so liberating. And after a while, I was just not interested in that sin anymore, and it just disappeared from my life. But it started with letting myself enjoy the love and acceptance of God no matter what. And I'm telling you, it's the only key to holiness. Like, forcing and trying and performing and putting on pressure is not the way. You can force yourself into showing temporary results, but in the long run, grace wins. You can make a great experiment with two people, one who is taught performance and the other one taught grace. And maybe in the short run, the one taught grace would try out things and not always behave well, while the one under condemnation would perform better. But in the long run, the one under condemnation will be burned out, or even leave God, not being able to live with the thought that he's not good enough of a Christian. But the one under grace will somehow discover that grace is not just it's not a freedom of, it's not a license to sin, it's actually a freedom from sin, and you can live with that gift. Like, grace is not just good enough for lift the condemnation from you, it's good enough to make you behave who you really are. And when the person realizes it, he can be holy effortlessly from the inside out. and that's the only thing that counts in heaven. Like, even if the one under pressure and condemnation could do it and live a life in holiness, it would be a fake thing. And God doesn't want fake. He doesn't want us to put it together and make it seem like he's not into that business. So yeah, teaching grace and receiving grace is the best thing you can do to yourself. And you can hate grace preachers as much as you like and post bad things about them. But on a lonely night, when you feel like you are really frustrated with your own spirituality and holiness, and you feel like you lack fruit, maybe you can Google that hated grace preacher and for the first time listen to what he actually says, because you might need it. And I'm talking to myself. I hated grace preachers and I was struggling with sin. I hated the very thing, the very phenomena that was actually the key to my freedom. And I'm harsh, and I'm not sorry for that, because I'm not harsh to you or to a movement or to a group or to a church or a denomination. I'm hard with that lie that keeps people in bondage and fear, and prevents people from enjoying life and God and actually receiving that free gift of salvation. Yeah. So you cannot overestimate the limitlessness of grace. The only thing we will be surprised at in heaven is how much we underestimated it. Like, oh my gosh, grace was actually enough for that as well. Oh, and I was missing that my whole life. How stupid is that? That's the only thing that will happen to us. No one is gonna have that welcome in heaven. Like, you used too much grace. We almost went bankrupt on the grace department because of you. Do you realize how much you have used up? Like, you almost used up for the portions prepared for others. Like, that's how much you've used. That's not gonna happen. It's limitless. And it's better to so-called abuse grace and just enjoy God no matter what, and let Him drench you into His love and exchange you and renew your mind to who you really are, than trying to force yourself into what is not coming from the inside out. Yeah, and this means you can't mess it up, you can't lose your salvation, you can't fall out, you can do nothing about it. You can just enjoy, and if your deeds and behavior never match up with the concept of holiness in your mind, then it's still fine. You're still the righteousness of God. However, I also believe in holiness, so much so that I don't just believe in holiness like, oh, we can try to be holy because that's what God wants us to do. I actually believe in perfect holiness. Like, I can be as He is in the world. Like, grace for me is not lowering the standards. It's like setting the standards crazy high. Like, I can live like Jesus. Okay, it's like I don't need to behave any less holy than He did. And it's not something I need to reach. It's something who I am. And by enjoying His love and acceptance, it's gonna happen through me without putting any effort into it. So I'm actually raising the standard very high. Like, you can live perfectly. Not that I tell you that I always act perfectly, but I'm saying that my perspective is there. Like, if He says my sinful nature died, as Paul says, and I was put to death with Jesus and raised from that with Jesus, now I can live for Him. And it sounds like perfect holiness, and I believe in that. But the road to that manifestation of the holiness, and the key to experience that holiness, is not trying to do that. Is enjoying grace and let Him do that. Yeah. So I hope yeah, I hope I provoked some thoughts, and I hope I killed some lies. At least it was very helpful for me. Like, I really enjoyed that. Like, knowing that yeah, grace is not just like a conditional thing that we can use for a certain thing with our efforts involved. Grace is the thing that does the whole thing from A to Z. It makes me so drunk. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Whoa. 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 Oh, it's kind of hot here. Yeah. Be drenched in the love of God and enjoy the holiness you already have. Whoa. And He's gonna make this fruit of holiness happen in you by accident. God bless you guys.